is Friday, April the 12th, and we are about to cap yet another fabulous week of the Sportsline Podcast on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Thanks so much for all the amazing feedback this week. It certainly motivates me and the team to keep working hard for you. Well, today on the pod, an old school writer who's now gone new school. Like so many of our guests on this podcast, this resume board is just far too short to capture what has been nearly, in fact, 5 decades of brilliance in the print business. According to people in the know, Steve Milton has the impressive knack for keeping the reader engaged, entertained, and informed right to the end. Now, speaking of the end, there was a recent and surprising conclusion to his decorated career at the Hamilton Spectator that has disappointed loyal and local readers. But there was big news this week that Steve Milton has joined the Hamilton Sports Group as what's described as a multi-platform columnist. To borrow the words from his first column, allow me to reintroduce myself. Here's the Hall of Famer, Steve Milton. Thanks for joining us here on the Sportsline Podcast.
Nice little riff there on the Rolling Stones, don't you think? Please allow me to introduce myself. They were talking about the devil.
Well, Jay-Z borrowed that line, too, right. for our younger audience as well, too. But, you know, hey, Milty, this is great to have you here. I think you and I discussed, I think, sometime mid-season for the Tiger Cats that your future was kind of hanging in the. You just didn't really know what was going on. You kind of had a feeling some things weren't going to end up in your favor, we'll say. So I think to ask the question for what so many of us, especially people here in the Hamilton area, they want to know what happened.
Well, it was legalese, right? And it has to do with the Bankruptcy Act and just a brief history that they offered buyouts and said there were one-time buyouts. And this is Torstar now, not the Hamilton Spectator, and you need to sometimes separate that even though
the parent
one
company
owns the other. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they basically, I took the buyout because I didn't have a company pension plan. There was reasons for that. That's not the Hamilton Spectator's fault or Torstar's fault. That was mine, personal life, that kind of thing. But and I said I would take it, but I didn't. I said I would take the employee departure package. Mm-hmm. That package, of course, included a buyout, and I would leave. That would be my part of the bargain. Well, once they put all Metroland into bankruptcy protection, one of the things that that apparently you can do, I don't know, I assume the union's still looking at that, is that I would still have to leave. Anybody who took the buyout would still have to leave, even though they weren't honoring the buyout. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's patently whatever it is, and I won't use words that are going to get me a lot of trouble, but I have a lot of adjectives about that. Right. But that's in the past. I cannot tell you how far behind me right now, what I would call legacy media, and I have nearly 50 years in the legacy media when you count the 10 years I had before that with smaller papers in Ontario. That's behind me. I wish all of my close friends at the Spectator well. I don't wish them any ill, but rearview mirror, and the mirror's broken. I can't even see it.
And I think that's probably the wise move to take, right? I mean, there's an understanding that in the beginning, for sure, there would be feelings of.
I was ticked.
To be upset and ticked, you've been done wrong. You put in that. I mean, we'll just think of the Spectator here. I mean, you put in near four decades is a lot of dedication and probably a lot of free hours work there. And
everybody in this business. I mean, we'll always say that about any job, and not just in media, but any job that's worth having.
Yeah, but it's not a job where you're clocking your time.
No, exactly. Right? Any job worth having is not like that.
Exactly.
Any job worth having, of course, has spins and turns, and any career worth having. And I'm looking at this as a new thing, as a new opportunity. I'm energized. I basically slept for a month in January, and this one. Allows me to have some time to myself too. We've built time into this. We're it'll be more 8 months, and except for the big stories, which there always are with the Tiger Cats and Forge. Free agency, big signings, people retiring, that kind of thing, hirings, firings, those things. They'll be on a spot basis. But basically, it gives me some time to myself with my kids, and I have a huge stable of grandchildren that I want to make sure I spend more time with, and also to get to the cottage a little bit, because this is a summer job.
I know that's your haven.
Yeah, it is my haven. It is my haven, and it's my family's haven too. We've had it a long time. We bought it many, many years ago, basically just the year before I came to Hamilton, really. So we've had it a long time. It's a family place. I want to stay there, and as much as I can. But really, I'll be up back and forth, because we're starting something fairly. It's not new. It's not new what we're starting in Hamilton Sports Group here. This is an extension of. We're calling it an evolution, and I view it that way, of what you and others have done for the audio network there. That was a unique concept, very unique concept. That was a little more of a revolution than this is. This is more of an evolution, but using the same principles and bringing some of the principles of the good principles of traditional media to it. So it'll be all platforms, which is visual, verbal, print, and for everything, and much more extensive than has existed already.
Well, and I think that's the wonderful thing, and what I've learned at working at the audio network too, is that you do have a little bit more time to say what you want to say, if you want to put it that way. And I think certainly, I'm governed by time here at CHCH. That's just the reality of news and television, that you have to package everything into a certain amount of time. Every once in a while, I get to expand a little bit, but that just doesn't happen as much as I think new media really wants it to be. And I think about new media, and I think about your days at the Spectator, and you were kind of on a precipice with this, and that's why I had such respect for Drew Edwards. You did this scratching post thing, which
became Three Down Nation.
Which became Three Down Nation.
Revolutionized the way it was covered in.
Absolutely, but it gave it more time. I mean, what we're seeing here: post-game shows, pre-game shows. Not so much with the audio network, because it just wasn't there, but it allowed for, I guess, expanded journalism with two journalists, but on television.
Right. We did that, and Drew every day had a blog. He did it. I think he went 4 consecutive years, I think, without missing a day, including holidays, including the big religious holidays too. He did that too. I think he should be in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame merely for that, because he changed things. Now, it made it very difficult on the rest of it, because all of a sudden there's this new bar, new standard, and I have to say that I really like the standard that Hamilton Sports Group. I wouldn't be there if I wasn't assured of a few things. One of which is that what I liked right away is I've just come out of nearly 50 years of an industry that for the last 30 of it was contracting in terms of resources and both financially and personnel. There just wasn't the time to do as much as you could. I mean, I can remember coming down here when the Spec asked me to come down and maybe see if I liked it, and I remember writing some dummy columns that never were printed. And I think I rode to the game with 4 writers, 4 Ticat writers, and of course, I was the only one basically doing last year with Scott Radley doing some, and now Scott's the only one, and he's got other responsibilities as well.
News stuff
as well, and so there's a shrinking. So it was pretty attractive to go to somebody that said, "We think this is worth expanding, let alone shrinking," and then we started having some serious talks about it. I found myself excited about it and offering ideas. And once I started offering ideas, I remember saying to Matt Affinick, who's the COO of basically runs the whole entire business side of HSG and many things people don't know he does. I remember saying to him, you know what, I think I'm getting excited about this, and I didn't want to tip my hand, but they kind of had me at that point, especially when they talked about, look, we want to expand things, we want to go the way that you've always gone, which is storytelling. This is all about storytelling. And if you don't have the time and the resources, you can't tell the stories well enough. You can't repeat them. You can't be there all the time. It's hard enough just to get the main stories all the time, let alone all of those things that make a give you a complete and more full picture, not only of the team, but the people who make up that team. Those two teams now, obviously with the Forge.
Well, you would know that. I mean, you and I mean, I think about this last night. I'm like, okay, how long have I known Steve for? Okay, well, I can think about a professional basis, but I also think about my first year at Sportsnet in 99, 2000, and thinking to myself, hey, I mean, you used to do some stuff with the hockey panel there, and some panel stuff back in the day there at Sportsnet.
I was fired 4 times by Sportsnet and 3 times by TSN. No, it's the other way around, I think.
Right.
Yeah, so I did a lot of that stuff.
And you did that stuff, and I thought to myself, as being a broadcast associate, which is a ground floor job, I was always proud to see you because I'm like, there's the Hamilton guy. There's the Hamilton guy making it there and doing his thing, and I always thought that was really good. And we bumped into each other and talked to each other
it was
a little
before
bit.
that, I think,
right?
because it was back, I think, when you were doing cable TV and you were doing the high school, and I knew you through that.
Through that.
And maybe even
for sure.
I don't know, what year did you start that?
Oh my goodness! But I think, hey, it's funny when you think.
Because I was living in Burlington.
You were living in Burlington, and you think about Steve Foxcroft and I and what we were doing on local cable TV, trying to make that big, and I think we had some success there.
Some good stuff.
But what people seem to forget, because it seems so crazy now when I think about it, that not every Tiger Cat game was on television. This is when a time when the rights were being held by CBC and TSN, and generally there was about 4 home games per year that were not on television that Steve and I called.
Right.
And we would have this 7-camera coverage, and we tried to pro it up as much as we can. And we got lots and lots of great feedback, but also seeing you there at practices and trying to follow your lead and getting to understand how you worked. But I think it was only until then I really started at Sportsnet. I started to get to practices. I mean, for a long, long time, I was there every day. Bernie Custis, seeing Angelo, talking to those guys. I was there at practice every single day, and right into maybe even the days with the likes of Ken Austin. And then this happened. I left Sportsnet, and I came here, and because of my responsibility, I just can't be at practice anymore.
And that's the same for media right across this town. It's been very difficult, and it's hard to do that. I mean, with all the responsibilities with the shrinking sport staff, I also had to do an awful lot of other sports. And so you'd be writing, but you're going to be writing remote anyways. You're going to be not necessarily in the office. I'm not an office type of guy. I like to go in and get that vibe of a newsroom because there's nothing like it. There's nothing like that exchange of ideas, of concepts that happen in a newsroom. But basically, sports writers are lone wolves, so I would do, instead of writing from home, I'd write from the stadium, and I could watch the practice of both the Forge and during their season, the Ticats that would come on right after them. So you're there, and you can sort of catch little things, and it's about being there. Jeff Day, maybe, who was the sports editor and a great one at the Spectator, made me do a thing called Being There, where I described what it was like to be at certain things for about 2 years. I was against it because I didn't like to use the first person. I didn't like to use I didn't like to use me. I definitely don't like to use third person, speak about, like I'm Steve Milton. Like, that's just weird. Steve Milton, like, just, what? That's just weird. So, but I never liked the first person. I'm going to do a lot more of that with it. But Jeff got me into that. But the focus of what I'm saying here is being there. You have to be there to get the stories, to get to fill out the things, to learn more and more and more about the right tackle, let's say, the left tackle of the Tiger Cats, and you end up finding out their stories. When you tell stories about people and you tell them repetitively, this is part of the oral tradition, it's part of the visual tradition. It goes back thousands of years, the oral tradition. Repetition. And I don't mean boring repetition, just reminding that a little bit about this person. Now, here's a little bit more about that person. Therefore, you understand them a little more than you did last week. And you don't even know that's happening when you're reading. You just know, you feel like you know them a little more. And the more you know a player, the more you're interested in that team that he plays on.
Absolutely. And before we get right into it, what you're going to be doing with the Hamilton Sports Group, let me ask you this question. And this could be challenging to you, and you're right. There's downsizing in television. There's downsizing in print and radio, who I think have been hit probably a little harder than TV.
Yeah.
Where are we right now in those industries? And are we getting to a dangerous spot?
Oh, beyond belief. And when I talked with your colleague and our great friend Louis earlier in the year, I can't remember, that wasn't January, before I had taken this on, I expressed my worry about the industry, and particularly about artificial intelligences. I mean, there are some things that it can do really well. It might be able to do really well for our industry, but overall, I worry about it, and I worry about where the industry itself is going because of, and we've seen in the States where that's happened, and we've seen the polarization move north here, and soon because of the echo chambers, and soon you're preaching to the choir and to nobody else because nobody else is listening. Those kinds of things. So I think the shrinking resources and the new realities that we allowed as standard media, all of us, all three types, radio, television, newspapers, to come in quickly and get established, use our stuff for free for a long, long time. Now it changed the economic model, all of those kinds of things, and it brought some element of irresponsibility to it, and we all know about that on social media and those kinds of things. And the longer it goes that way, the more people will maybe not be able to sort it out. And that's what scares me about AI. And the only reason that it scares me is because I've seen what happens already with social media. You know, soon you don't recognize legitimacy from illegitimacy. The one thing about CH, about the SPAC, about CHML and all those things, you knew where we were. You knew where to come and find us, either online or in person. Well, when somebody's using nickname handles and, you know, and phony addresses and all of those kinds of things, I'm talking about things that we all know. That creates a real problem, and it's a danger to democracy, even in sport. Right? Drug use would be one. If there's nobody there unearthing the drug use, and then we don't even know what we're watching, you know, and there aren't that many people doing it, getting hard into those stories.
Well, you know, and I'm joining you on this, and I've gotten to an age, you know, I'm 57 years old now, right? And I think to myself of what this industry was when I first walked in, you know, the Sportsnet newsroom and the anchors and the people that I learned from and people I would call mentors. And I look at the business right now, and I am scared as well, too. There are people that you and I mean, and there's no reason to name names or whatever, but I just look at it as a broad sort of situation. Sometimes where it could be baseball, it could be Ticats games, and I walk into the press area, and there's people I don't know, and I ask him, like, who's that? And he does this blog, he does this online,
and
or whatever.
There's a Scrum mentality to it.
Yeah, and I don't get, and sometimes I'm like, well, this guy, what trained, you know, and sometimes even when I talk to these people, they don't even know the history of the team they're covering.
And some do, though. Look,
and lots do, but there are some there I don't get.
I'm not going to live in the past. Right. Believe me, I'm not. And I'm encouraged by a lot of things because some of the people that are out there now doing the job, partly because of the nature of the job, have to have got better at certain things in that job. And one thing would be the use of metrics and understanding metrics, which that isn't the only thing that it can be, but some of those people have to be really, really good at that. I'm encouraged. And a lot of people, I think it's a bit spectrum. I find this in society too, that with young people, the ones that are new in the industry, there's some people over here, and they should be way better than either of us were when we started, because there's another generation that went ahead of them.
Absolutely.
You know, you're standing on those shoulders and we stood on other people's shoulders and all of those kinds of things. Those people. And then there are the kind of things that have disturbed you a little more. Again, I'm not going to live in the past on that. I want to embrace the future, be part of the way the future changes. And that's part of the opportunity here is that when we're doing something new, at least for a professional sports franchise in Canada, to have a multi-platform, multi-sport person doing multi-platform things. It's the only place in Canada so far that's doing that, and I think it won't be the last one.
Well, that's the best part about it. And when you look at it, what you're doing right now is that you're going to be able to do the long form stuff, which I'm sure you write books, so I'm sure you love the long form stuff.
I like the short form stuff too.
I know you do. I know you do. But there's something about being able to tell a story, as we talked about there too. And it gives you the ability that I think a lot of people won't have the ability, because I'm sure I've seen this over the great Steve Simmons, all the people who I think are the best people in your business are the ones that I sometimes look at the locker room, and there they are sitting beside an athlete, talking to them, writing down notes, or they have your little recorder or whatever the case is. And I'm like, okay, well, in television, you really can't do that because, as you said, it comes back to the scrum mentality, and that's the way TV's become. And you're going to be able to, with the Hamilton Sports Group, covering the Ticats, with Forge, giving the local people in this area and whoever else, because social media is out there, people from all over the country can read your stuff and absorb your material.
And they have great technical people there that will spread out little. So I might write a long form thing, but they'll parse off some part of it. And use it just on the social media thing. A really good example was when we did the audio thing the very first time with JR on RJ, I should say, on this week that appeared. The social media people for the Hamilton Sports Group pulled out a really poignant quote about my personal journey. And used it only on social media.
I used it on social media this morning.
Exactly. I'm not going to let somebody else tell me when I'm done. I'll decide that. It sounds like an athlete. Sounds like an athlete who maybe play too long, but those are the kinds of things that can really, really help, and it draws people to the site. And we really want to. And the more people who draw the site, the better it is for those people, because they're going to find out more. This is going to be over time. It already is that way in a lot of ways. This is going to be the ultimate go-to place to learn everything about the Tiger Cats and the Forge, the beauty and the warts. If we don't point out the warts somehow, then you fail to see the beauty.
Here's the tough question, and this is something
I know what's coming.
Here it's coming because Mr. Milty, because I've had to learn this. Right. I'm going to be now entering my third season, doing stuff at the Audio Network, where your paycheck says Hamilton Sports Group.
Right.
But I also work at this place, and it says CHCH, who hold me to different standards. And on a reporter, anchor, journalistic style, I have to behave differently in many ways here than I do there. I'm employee of the team. When I'm doing pregame and postgame. But when I'm here, if I choose to criticize the team, I'm going to criticize the team. And that's going to be an interesting, because you didn't have to hold back with it. And I know you did it with intelligence with the Spectator, but how are you going to ride that level?
Well, we're still working all of that out. But I can tell you this, I wouldn't be here unless I was convinced that there was lots of room there, wiggle room. And a lot of it comes down to what you think a columnist does. And in my mind, a columnist interprets. But part of interpretation and explanation is some level of criticism when it's merited. And we've talked about this a lot. And what swung it for me was when we talked about, with Scott Mitchell in general, with Matt Afanek more specifically and directly, is that what we're looking for is fairness. All right. I understand there'll be times when we differ on what fairness is. I will not cross a journalistic principle line, but there'll be times when there probably there'll be things that I get outvoted on, those kinds of things. But it's a case-by-case basis. We're going to talk about specific instances all the time. How far can we go on this? But I will be critical. Critiquing is probably the right word to do here, under the larger phrase of, or the larger concept of analysis and interpretation. And that's what it's going to be. I mean, not everything I did at The Spectator was ripping them hard. I mean, I always ripped them when I felt they were, and the last 2 years, let's face it, they're 8-10 twice, and twice losing a playoff game, right? And couldn't beat the top teams last year. They know these are facts. These aren't interpretations. This is what happened. They didn't beat the two top teams in their division all year, and they were below 500. So those are things that needed to be improved on, and the manner in which I say it might be a little different, but the facts aren't going to change. The fairness of that, and I trust over 50 years my journalistic integrity. That's basically, I didn't set out this way, But that's basically what accrued over time is that when you're in that business, you can't survive it very long unless you, particularly because the readers will turn off of you.
For sure.
And if you don't do that, and show that you have some integrity on it, then readers will turn off on you. So I trust that. I trust myself on that.
That's a maturity in your
I trust myself on that, and I have to ask people here to trust me on that as well.
Right. And I think it's interesting.
And trust the Ticats.
Oh, for sure.
Because this takes balls what they're doing.
Oh,
it really
for sure.
they brought the wolf into the hen house.
Right.
Right.
Well, no, but hey, it's easy when the Ticats win 6 in a row.
That's right.
It becomes a little bit more challenging when they lose 6 in a row. I can think of many, over the last couple of seasons, sitting in our post-game show with myself and Luke, and I could be Courtney Stephen, obviously Andy Fantus, and you gotta sometimes call it as we see it.
Well, sure, and it can be. It doesn't have to necessarily be one of those ones where you cut everybody off at the knees.
No.
I mean, these guys aren't trying to lose games.
No,
they're not
of course
trying.
not.
And that's a wonderful thing that I've learned about sport over the years. It's one of the reasons I stayed at it. I actually wanted to get out of it for a while. I thought, I don't know if I want to spend my whole life in sport. Mm-hmm. But one of the things about it is you're always around people who are very good at what they're doing and are trying as hard as they can. I mean, and you don't see that everywhere. I mean, you don't see it in every job. I mean, you always have passengers, but there are very few passengers on a sports team because they don't last very long. And I like that. So you have to understand that. So you don't have to be vicious in nailing people, but you have to be honest. You have to say, this is something that they need to change. Like if it's a team that's hurting, or and they'll know that you're not telling them anything new. So that's about establishing validity with the people that are going to come to read and know everything that they want to know about Tiger Cats. And other parts of that are going to be that we're going to expand just a number of, we have access now that I didn't have. I had a lot of access before because I was always there, but it's a whole different thing. Now I'm working for them. I'll have some more access to allow me to find those kinds of stories because I'll have longer times to talk with people.
Right.
A little more, I can always get every player, and that's one of the wonderful things about access, to delve more into who they are and the stories that they have. The stories in the CFL and Forge too. Given Forge.
I want to get to Forge.
Yeah. We'll stick with the Ticats at the moment. The stories there are really interesting, like beyond belief, some of them. And part of it is because of so many players that get here. By the time they get here, Americans have been rejected elsewhere. So there's an awful lot. And there's some reason that they didn't make the NFL, which was their original dream. And you ferret those out. You find things out. When you talk to Simone about his past, and we did a big thing on that during the Grey Cup in 21 about his past.
Tim White's past.
Tim White's past. Wow. Like there's Lawrence Woods when he was here. Incredible. Incredible thing with Lawrence Woods, and just without being there and talking to them, having that kind of access, you're just not going to get as much of that, and that's where we're really going to push more onto it. You're going to see a lot more of that. Like I say, this is the place you're going to go to get all the Ticat stuff, and I mean all the Ticat stuff. Some of it might be simple stuff, like we were talking the other day about the ratio and how important that is.
Yep.
But it's really difficult to understand.
Most people don't understand it.
Half the time I don't. They changed some rules.
I don't know how the officials do it during the game.
Oh, I know. There's a good type of thing that makes a really good story that we right now, me when I was at the Spectator, anybody else, you don't have time or space to do that. There's a larger story going on.
That's right.
How the Ticats are doing. You haven't got time to. We can do both on ticats.ca and forge.ca or forge.ca, CPL.ca. So that's the kind of thing that is a real service to the people who follow the team. Not only, Bubba, to the hardcore fans, but to the people who are on. And there's a lot of sort of on the edge fans now. And one of the things about the Tiger Cats that people don't understand is how many, as much hardcore fans there are a lot of people that just come for the experience, the social viewing thing, which they pioneered in Canada. And it's a big thing. And at any one time, by their own figures, something like 3,000 people are not watching the game directly, but they're totally and 100% aware of it because of their phones, because of the scoreboard, because of all the TVs around, all of those kinds of things. They're younger people doing those things. So they aren't as invested, particularly in the history and the team itself. Over the years, they're invested in their own experience at the stadium. So we want to make that experience as well better. And part of it is explaining what you're seeing, explaining what you're going to do. And we'll do that with video boards. They got really good technical people at the Hamilton Sports Group that can put up, and we'll use that example about the ratio, how that works,
right.
And I can refer to it and explain it. That's just one example. There are
there's all kinds of
things like
that. The possibilities are endless, even right down to, before Andy and I would go on air for pregame, which is, basically an hour pregame show. We're down on the field, right, taping our 3 points, right. Andy's 3 points to victory for the Tiger Cats, right? But that's all interactive action playing for the fans, and it's generally not, rocket science, what we're talking about. But as you said, maybe not talking to the hardcore Tiger Cat fan, but the guy that just wants to know, or the girl that just wants to know.
And you can make it so that you're not talking underneath a hardcore fan who knows a lot of things. And you're not talking above somebody who's more of a casual fan. There's a blend there. And that stadium is full of that. That, the Ticats, it's quite an interesting dynamics when you go there. And I've said this before. I remember writing about it when Ivor Wynne closed. And Tim Hortons Field has since replaced it as this. That is this city's town square. A Ticat game particularly is metaphorically the town square of this town. You want to know something about this town? Go to a few Ticat games and listen and watch. You're going to learn a lot about this town.
Just on that point, just a quick one for you. I remember when I first started here at CHCH and talking to the news director, Mike Catrice, very smart man, in the business for many years, and talking to him about, I want more time for the Tiger Cats. I want more time to dedicate for the Tiger Cats. And he'd be like, why? And he was a real news guy. He wasn't a big sports guy. He was a big Jays fan. I always remember that. Really not a big football fan. And I would say to him, Mike, the way I look at it and why I deserve more time for this story or to more highlight time is because, can you tell me an event or a time or a place where 25,000, maybe even 30,000 in the old barn come together for 3 hours? So to me, that's the biggest thing going. And that's why it should lead the newscast and not, some robbery.
Town Square.
It is. It's a place where we all come together.
I used to see the judges sitting one row ahead of the people they just sent to jail. And you see the people that ran the mills and the people that worked on the line in the mills. They were all there sharing a common experience. It is the great social leveler in this town. That stadium, that team.
We've spent a lot of time about the Ticats because it is something that unifies us. But this Forge FC, come on now. This is crazy. What has happened here? First of all, the emergence of the Canadian Premier League has been fantastic, a big success story across the nation. But the team here in Hamilton
set the tone.
It's set the tone. It's winning championships. It's building a fan base, and their success continues to grow.
Right, and there's a lot of growth still to be done there. Both in the way it's covered, and the number of people that are there. They draw well, but they should be drawing more. This is a club that's really, and you don't really know this till you talk to some of the people from Central America and CONCACAF, and they come in, the writers come in, mostly Spanish, coming in, and they know, honestly, more about the Forge than a lot of people who live here.
Great point.
But a lot of the soccer people here have come. I mean, you go to the Forge games, you're going to come back to at least one more. You're going to, because the experience is good, even though there's only 6,000 people in a 23,000 seat. And I say only. That's pretty good.
Loud.
It's loud and it's passionate. The games are exactly the right length, but the skill level, even if you don't know soccer very well, the skill level is particularly the offensive skill level and the manner in which the Forge plays. The Forge plays an awful lot the same way that John Herdman wanted the national team to play with that special group of that once in a lifetime generation that we're now seeing in men's soccer in Canada. We've had it in women's soccer now for quite some time, but it's very offensive. Like, and I mean offensive.
They attack.
I don't mean in that bothers you.
Yeah, they like
attack.
Yep.
Press, and of course they've got a natural rivalry there. Not natural. I mean, it sort of is natural because there's some CFL tones to it. But it started really. It started in the very first game that the two teams played, and it was pretty insane, that game between Cavalry, who, as luck would have it, is coming in this weekend. And this is it's on the site today. I've written ostensibly about and it is about their first full-time Mexican player who's really, really, really good, and his name is Daniel Parra, and you better watch him tomorrow on Saturday. He's a guy you want to pay attention to because he's so aggressive and he's on the ball quickly. He's the kind of player that the Forge has seen so much of in the Champions League, particularly when they play them. He as Bobby Smirniotis says, he personifies the style of play that they play in the Mexican League. And the Mexican League is among the top 2 or 3 leagues for excitement and entertainment in the world, according to Bobby. So they have that. They're exciting to watch, but they're also just damn good. They are really, really good.
People forget they won the league last year.
Yeah, and probably the second greatest overtime ever played after Argentina-France, right?
Yes.
I mean, you're never going to beat that given the level of the two players that rose there.
Wow.
But the overtime deserves a movie. It was that good.
It was spectacular.
And not ending, but basically clinched by an Olympico, which you very rarely see, by a star player who was a star player in the first year, the player who kind of jumped up in the CPL, and we're talking Tristan Borges here, as a 19-year-old, and got sold for a lot of money to Europe, and that was about 3 years ahead of what the CPL was expecting for a young player to happen. And that's part of soccer, right? Part of all soccer teams, even Manchester United, even Liverpool, part of their economics is developing players and selling them.
Yes.
And then of course developing players for their own.
See that play. You hear the players on loan.
Right.
Like you hear that.
And Forge does a great job of developing those players. Bobby operates on a 3-year cycle, right? And in the third year, you're expecting the people who were kind of just getting few minutes in the first year to have become, more important to the team. But also there's players they bring back that you need as core players that fans can identify with all of the time. I know if I go, I'm going to see. I mean, Kyle Becker could play a whole bunch of other places and could have. He has become the face of the CPL. Hasn't become it. He has been it since the season one.
For sure.
Since season one is the face of the CPL. Forge is the face of the league, followed by, now I would say closely, I think the Forge would argue with us given their record, but by Calgary. I want to give you a stat that's in our story today about Daniel Parra. They've played 5 complete seasons. So this first game against Cavalry on Saturday is the start of their 6th season. In those 5 seasons, those two teams have played 26 times. Over the same period of time. So they're great rivals right now. Part of it's because it's been a smaller league. Part of it is because they've both been really, really good. So much better than anybody else. I mean, you get the odd team coming back up, and there's created an updraft. But those two teams have created the updraft right from the start. And it's no surprise that they're the only two that have maintained their coaches. It's no surprise that they're the only two teams that came into it with players already having played together through Sigma. With Hamilton, because it was Bobby Smirniotis and his brother Costas teams, and through Calgary Foothills, which won the PDL, which is a USL thing in 2018, and Tommy Wheeldon, their coach, very aggressive, outgoing, loves to create controversy, and fabulous for the game in this country because of that, and committed to this league, big time Tommy. You got to give him an awful lot of credit. So they had, I think he brought in about half of his team from that. And they understood that you had to have players that play together. And you see other teams now trying to do that. They've created an updraft where, you get people like Ottawa making all these super signings and people making all these predictions about them for this year. So they have played They played 25 times. They played 12 times in the first 16 months of this league. Over that period of time of the 5 years, 2019 to 2024, and remember, there was only a 10-game season the 1 year in the bubble, right? So it was shorter. So 30 games fewer than they, or 20 games fewer than they normally would have played. Manchester U and Manchester City have played over that 5 years 16 times. The two Milan teams, AC and International, have played 14 times. I think the numbers are. Yeah, I advise everybody to go to the site because that's where the real numbers are going to be. And for local comparison, TFC's biggest rival is Columbus Crew.
Yep.
Even though you would think it'd be Montreal, but and it is to some degree. There's that's a derby. That's a in a way, but the real derby there is with the Trillium Cup, and because of the history of the fans and the wildness of the games in Columbus and the fact that people have been arrested down there and had to stay overnight from TFC, and they've only played during that time 10 times or something. So this is phenomenal. If repetition means you get to understand stories better, we understand Cavalry versus Forge big time.
Well, I think it's great. There's obviously a physical aspect to the games when these two teams play. It's going to be an outstanding day at Tim Hortons Field. Again, celebration of a team that's coming off a championship. I think it's fair to say that whether it's played up or not, there's a little heat between the managers as well too.
Oh, sure.
Which I think is fun, and so everyone, please get out there and support.
But they both respect each other.
Absolutely. How can they not? They've both established so much, right?
Yeah, and but they're very different types, but they're in it for the same reason.
Sure.
You talk to Tommy, you talk to Bobby, and they both are in it for the same reason. They come at it at very, very different angles. Part of that's where they live and their past history and those kinds of things. There's a difference between Calgary. Yeah. There's a difference between Alberta and Ontario.
Well, no, and for sure. And there's a difference between the personalities. I mean, there's a difference between Sheldon Keefe and John Tortorella, right? That's just the way they are. Both successful coaches. And I mean, one obviously they're a lot longer, but just the way they operate is different. So we got a lot to look forward there for the Tiger Cats. Forge, again, just starting this week, and their season continues. We'll continue from there. I want to bring back one last thing here about you that I think that a lot of people don't understand and maybe don't even recognize or even know, is that you've written a lot of books.
Yeah.
You've written a lot of books, and we talk about the long form stuff and the fact that you get to expand and build and chapters and tell those different stories and build someone up. Your involvement in Skate Canada is very underrated. I'm going to use that word because I think only the people in the figure skating business understand all that you've contributed to that. What does that mean to you?
It means a lot. As you mentioned at the top, or it was on the graphic at least, I'm in the Figure Skating Hall of Fame for Canada and also for the Football Hall of Fame. But there's not a division in the skating world. You're in there as a builder. There is no media wing like there is in hockey and in football. Not to diminish that. I mean, you don't tell the stories, then the people who are in what we call the main hall don't have a chance to get there because we're the ones that basically tell the stories and always have for well over 100 years in football. And it means a lot, and there are only 3 writers in the Hall of Fame. One, a very close friend of mine. They're both dead now. Jim Proudfoot from the Toronto Star, and George Gross is the other one. Wow. And they're actually both in the Football Hall of Fame too, which is nice to see. So it means an awful lot. It was figure skating I owe everything to, and specifically Brian Orser and Doug Lee, who was his coach, because I was working in Podunk Corner as Aurelia when Brian was there, and basically I started going around the world on my own dime through freelancing to cover, because nobody was covering figure skating, and so it really got me to several Olympics. It got me to all kinds of world championships. It also meant that I had a bit of a international, and I would say big time, not me big time, but the milieu that you're in when I got here. So I was not I basically started right away with the Blue Jays, right, and in their prime. Yep. I had 9 months at what I call the noble experience or experiment of the Burlington Spectator, which is where I would have first encountered you.
Yep.
And then I came here on the promise that I would get the Blue Jay beat, and of course that was their biggest 10 years ever. I mean, I think the latest or the earliest they were ever eliminated from the pennant or from the division chase was 6 games in those 10 years.
Oh, it was in the Cito years for sure.
Cito years and even the the first couple of Jimmy years.
They were right. About that. Yeah.
I mean, they blew it there in '87.
That's what got him fired.
Yeah, they lost 7 in a row. Ultimately, did. Yeah. And Cito, of course, and they won four division titles and went to the World Series twice and won them both. I've always joked, hey, you guys should look what happened in the 10 years I was there. You should pay me just to go because you haven't had 10 years close to that. And look at for younger viewers of this, they won't remember some of these big names, but they were huge names across the country at the time. Alomar and Steve and Clancy and Key and Dave Stewart and Dave Winfield
Guzman
and of course Big Joe.
Oh yeah,
Joe hitting and Guzman, of course, and
Borders
to be part of that. So figure skating really did all of that for me. And my first book was Brian Orser. I saw Brian 2 weeks ago at the World Championships, and he's just been honored with a special award from the International Figure Skating Hall of Fame for career accomplishment. And only 2 or 3 people ever have been given that, and Brian's one of them, and he deserves it. People forget how great he was and what he did for the sport, and kind of what figure skating was huge. And this city in the 90s, when figure skating had hit its biggest peak, starting with there were 2. They switched Olympics then, right? So you ended up having 3 Winter Olympics in a basically 4.5 year period.
When they didn't have them the same year.
They didn't have them the same year anymore. They added an extra one in.
Yes.
And it was cheaper to do it with that. So, and at the same time, it was Tanya Nancy. So there was 10-year period there when it was credible. Figure skating was full of millionaires. It looked like the growth sport. It definitely was the growth sport in the 90s. And it started with a scandal, essentially, that popularity, which was Tanya Nancy, and ended. That golden period ended with a scandal, which was the French judge at the 2002, which is still affecting the sport in North America.
You think so, eh?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, having watched it, I've been around figure skating. I think this is 45 years now. I've been around international figure skating. So, yeah, it's a big thing, and I got into it accidentally because I got into it through hockey and football because I had. Did I ever tell you about this? The greatest job in the history of 17-year-old boys in Canada.
No.
And my football
coach.
Let us know. My football coach in high school also had a summer job at the world's biggest hockey school, teaching, running the off-ice program. That means the counselors, the swimming programs, the fitness programs, all of those kinds of things. And because I was a decent football player, he hired me to work there in my first summer in '66 when I was 17. And I'd say 5 or 6 Leafs are working there, including Mahovlich, Shaq, all of those people. So it's the last summer before they won their last cup, and then I worked there the next 2 years. I was a counselor, and then I taught swimming and all of those kinds of things, off-ice things. Attached to it was a swimming pool, and it was in the city, and it was Tam O'Shanter Summer. It was the biggest hockey school in the world. It's where power skating was invented by figure skaters, was there by those people. And all of Canada's best figure skaters trained there in the summertime, particularly that summer, all of them. And let's face it, most of them were 17-year-old girls. So it was a heck of a thing. So I saw some girls walking by one time, and I thought, I've never seen this before. And I walked into the rink, and I forgot about those girls, and I just watched what was happening on the rink. Everybody's skating backwards, faster than anybody in the NHL could skate forwards at that time. And they were all falling on these incredible jumps, getting up, dusting themselves off without equipment on. And I became mesmerized by it, and I became very close to all those skaters over time, many of whom became coaches eventually. So when I moved to Orillia in 1979, I knew what a triple axel was and how important that was, how big an event that was. And Brian Orser had just done what was essentially the first triple axel ever. So they had never written about it in Orillia because they didn't know. They didn't know that they had a guy living in town, training there, who had done this incredible thing. So I started writing about him, and it's all based back on that job that I had. Wow. It was fantastic. We got to play hockey every night. All the Leafs used to come there as they'd get panicky about training camp coming up because they played themselves into shape in training camp in those days. They weren't in shape for 12. Sure. Yeah, so they'd get all panicky. So we had ice time every night. So next thing you know, and they need extra guys, I'm playing hockey with all the Leafs. I'm 17. Two things happened with that. It got me. The big thing that it did for me was I recognized that like everybody, like all human beings, athletes are human beings, and there's some people that you admire and some people that you don't admire. So when I got to things like the Blue Jays or World Championships or the Olympics, which I'd done, I think 2 of them before I got here, I wasn't overawed. I had that experience when I was 17 years old.
Young.
Yeah, so I feel very, very comfortable in that milieu. And then, of course, the second thing was it introduced me to figure skating, and figure skating changed everything for me.
We could have like 3 shows here, Steve, and I think that's, for my feeling, the respect that I have for you for what you've done in the business, and I think because I've been in the business long enough now, I understand what it takes to have the longevity.
Yeah.
And I respect that, and to see what you've done, multi-sport. Like I said, you used to vote for the Hall of Fame, if I remember correctly.
For Cooperstown, I just quit about 5 or 6 years ago because I couldn't do it honestly.
You can't be there every game.
Well, I can't judge the people today the way I did before. You might as well have a bot do it. And I did that. I voted for Cooperstown for 22 years.
Look at that. Yeah. Baseball, football, so accomplished in the things that you've done. And I'll be honest with you, I felt sad. I remember when you were telling me what was probably going to happen at the Spectator, because you're that guy that I know fans look forward to reading, and they know they're getting the brass tacks. They're getting the truth. I
appreciate that, Bub. And here's what I'm going to say about that. Right. You can actually read more of me now.
Well, this is more of me. And this is where I'm going.
More than you used to be able to.
Because I thought to myself, if this is the end of his career, you know what? He's got this cottage. He can go up there and live and write a book and go off in the sunset. But, I'm like, why wouldn't the Ticats hire this guy? Like, to continue doing the same work he's doing now with the Spectator, but probably even better, right? Because he's working for the team in a sense. And obviously they knew what they're talking about. As you said, there's very smart people in that organization, and that's why you're there. So I think I speak on behalf of Hamiltonians and Ticat fans all over the world, I will say, because I have learned that with Ticats Audio Network. There are Ticat fans all over the world.
It's amazing.
Right? It is amazing.
All you have to do is wear something that says Hamilton, and you're in Beirut or something.
And Oski Wee Wee!
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is fantastic to know that the work continues. I'm glad that you reintroduced yourself.
Yeah.
And what was your line again? About the Spectator? Sorry. But,
I'm just not going to let... and it wasn't the Spectator. Let's say...
That's all right. It's Tour Star, sorry.
Yeah.
Just get it one more time. I just want to hear you say it.
Nobody's going to define when I'm going to leave. I'll do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Sportsline Podcast. We look forward to reading, seeing your work, and, of course, you and I working together again.
That's great, and I've appreciated your friendship all these years.
Oh, thank you very much, Guy. Hey, that's your Sportsline Podcast for the day, and as you have just seen and heard, we love talking to sports, especially sports lifers. And if you do know of an athlete, team, or book to promote the Sportsline Podcast, do want to hear from you. Please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button, and if you do have something to say, comment. Check out all of our informative podcasts here on CHCH. We do have to offer, just like Trending Now and Newsmakers. For the amazing folks that make the Sportsline Podcast possible, thank you so very much, and we will see you next week.